Hi, welcome back to Stock Talk. So today I'm going to spend a couple minutes just talking about the trigger time frame for a few minutes. I want to give credit where credit is due. First of all, if you've read my book or watched any of my videos, I'm sure you realize that I like to use multiple time frames, and really I like to use two time frames side by side. And I really am looking to, what I'm trying to do there is I'm trying to, number one, on the higher time frame, find the best trends. And on the lower time frame, the real goal for using multiple time frames is by using this lower time frame, I'm going to try and improve my timing and lower my risk. Let's go ahead and get into the agenda today, because I want to just talk about what I call an opposing trend trigger. Now, I did not coin this phrase, and in fact, I'm going to show you who did, and one of the reasons why I started looking into this years ago. But the goal here, again, is to, on one side of the equation, is to help improve the timing of a trade or an investment. And the second is to reduce the risk. And so once we get through this, I'm going to go through the stocks that came through. I got actually a decent amount of stocks coming through. I love to see more people throwing in a few symbols here and there when they get the opportunity. But I've got some guys that have been pretty consistent in terms of feeding me symbols. So, but I'd love to see a more broad array. If you have an interest in an individual stock, just go ahead and send it over to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Before I get into the specifics of opposing trends, let me just tell you my services can be found at rabilstockresearch.com. And so this show is designed for me to analyze your stock picks. What my service does is provide my stock picks. I go through thousands of charts each month. I really try and work down to a select number that I think are very attractive, especially looking at monthly and weekly time frames to try and look for where the big trends are, the stronger trends. If you're interested in trying the product, you can go to the services page and go to the individual stock package and type in Stock Talk in the coupon code, and you can get the first 2 months for $50. Let's go ahead and look at the, I want to switch to this opposing trend trigger. And so Don Miller wrote this back in 2001. Don Miller is now an E-mini trader, but at the time he was trading the QQQ on an intraday basis. So he was using micro time frames, and he was also using different moving averages. But I kind of took this phrase because it's really what I'm trying to do when I'm looking at my moving average complex. I actually learned it from a different book, but when I meshed the two together, I found it to be a really great approach. Because what we're trying to identify, based on the way Don explains it in this article, and I just took a few paragraphs out of it, but he's looking at two time frames: the traded time frame, or what I would call where you can find the tradable trend, and then we're looking for where that trade is, and that's on the tradable time frame, and then you go to the trigger time frame. And so what we're trying to do with this is we're trying to find the tradable trend and then look for trend support on that time frame, which is typically a moving average. I'm typically looking for a pullback toward trend support, which I would consider to be the 18 in the way I use it, the moving averages that I use. It can be the 40 every now and again, but for the most part, it's usually right around the 18 MA. So we've got the traded time frame, which is the higher time frame, which is that trending time frame, and then the lower time frame, which is the trigger. Now, while we're looking at a pullback on the higher time frame, this pullback is causing the lower time frame to go in a direction that's opposite the trend on the traded time frame. So if I'm in an uptrend on the traded time frame, I'm going to be in a downtrend on the trigger time frame. So this is key. If I know that I'm in a downtrend on one time frame and on the higher time frame I am in an uptrend, then really what I'm looking for is a sign that the trigger time frame is getting back in line with the traded time frame. This will make a little bit more sense when I go into the chart example today. But I wanted to make sure I covered this, and I wanted to give Don kind of credit because I talk a lot about opposing trend triggers in my videos and stuff, and I want to make sure people know I didn't coin the phrase, but I do think it's a great way to look at it. Higher time frame trend, lower time frame going the opposite direction, and then we're looking for a trigger off that lower time frame. And what he says here, I completely agree, and I've been saying since for years now that the reason why this is so powerful is twofold. Number one, it's additional evidence that the continuation of the traded trend has begun to occur. So that means it improves your timing. That's what he's saying here. And then second, once you've gotten in the trade through the trigger, its own MA support can be used to fine-tune exits and trail stops. So it lowers risk. So those are the two reasons why I like to use this opposing trend method and why I really use multiple time frames. I want to switch over to a chart. So I just want to do this real quick and just show. So this is Microsoft, and we've got, I've actually pointed at 3 different times. On the left side, I've got a weekly chart, and on the right side, I've got a daily. And I'm pointing to 3 different times where we've pulled back on the weekly chart to what I would call trend support. Now, in this case, it also had price support. You see this major price support where it was pulling back to around 225. So it rallied up and it had showed enough strength with MACD making a new high, ADX making a new high, and then we get a pullback. And trend support where 18 is rising above a rising 40. So I know I've got a trend on this time frame. It's the tradable trend, and I'm looking for a pullback. Now, during that pullback, I'm looking for the opposite to take place on the daily chart. That's where the 18 is below the 40 and price is below both moving averages. That occurs on this bar right here. If we go to the next sequence where you rally up and pull back again, that's this right here on the daily chart. We rally up and then we pull back, and we pull back long enough to cause the 18 to cross down below the 40 and price is below both moving averages. So I have a setup in place, uptrend on this time frame, and now I have a setup on this time frame because this time frame is confirmed going in the opposite direction. Price below the moving averages and the 18 is below the 40. So once I have that, then I'm looking for a trigger back to the upside. And then this is the 3rd time this occurred. So I'm going to focus in on just this one and just give a real quick synopsis of what takes place. I mean, I am looking at trend analysis here. So I'm watching the trend. We're breaking a trend line here as we move up and cross the 40. That is an operative buy signal on any one of these types of triggers. If you close back above both moving averages, as Don would say on his opposing trend trigger article, that is a signal that this is getting back in line. What I like to do is observe what this looks like at that point. And if I'm up 3 or 4 days in a row, I might look for the first pullback and this pinch play here as an operative signal to get back in, or maybe take the second cross of the 40 in this instance as a signal. And that would be the 3, completing the 3. So break of the trend line would be 1. And then coming back to test would be 2, turning back up and taking out this prior high would be 3. So these are the types of things I think you want to be on the lookout for. The beauty of this is if I get in on this move here, on this move after it's made a new bottom like that, then I can use this as the stop. This shows up on this time frame as a higher bottom, where on this one, it's really not showing up as that much, a tiny little swing bar only. And so in this instance, I would use this low as a stop. I'd be willing to do that, maybe give it a little room underneath that. But what it's doing is improving my timing because it's telling me that this trend is getting back in line with this trend over here. So that's what we're trying to identify, improve our timing, lower our risk. Anyway, so I just wanted to make sure I covered that because I haven't given a real detailed look at this for the stock talk, and I wanted to make sure I did. So anyway, let's go ahead and get into some individual stocks and do some analysis. So the first stock request is Bitcoin, and so I wanted to cover this and make this I think it's a really good transition for what I was just talking about, because I want to show how this opposing trend sort of plays out, because we have this strong trend on the monthly with the big up move and then the pullback. And notice the ADX and the MACD confirming the move, and then we got the pullback. It didn't make it all the way to the 18, but I'm always looking for, you know, the area around the 18 to be trend support. So we pull back there, and then if you notice at this point, it actually crossed back above both moving averages before the 18 crossed down below the 40. And so this is sort of an alternative method, alternative approach. I wouldn't buy that crossover in this instance because they were too far apart. But there are times when the lines will just be coming together, and that is not a bad, you can still buy the crossover if you have a zero line reversal. But if you notice what's taking place, we turned right at the MACD, turned right at the zero line and got things turned up. And then we got the pullback towards the 18, and it was a pinch play on the MACD as well. And then at that point, we had the low ADX. So really, this was more of an optimum entry on this opposing trend setup from monthly to weekly. But notice what took place, and I want you to understand how this approach works in all time frames. And I think it shows that the markets are fractal, because if you look at this, we have this move to the upside, and then we get a pullback, a 3 to 4 bar pullback to the 18 MA. If we go to the daily chart right at this level, we have this ABC decline on the daily, and then it crosses right back up through. 18 is below the 40, price is below both, and then you cross right up through with a big green bar. You could have a trend line in place if you want. In this instance, because Bitcoin is so volatile, the ADX and MACD might have had you thinking that this might take a little bit longer, but really the trade was off the weekly into the monthly. So you kind of want to keep that in mind, but still you had the operative signal when you got back above this opposing trend, and it got going there. So I think that's kind of interesting, but it completes what we were just talking about, and it shows how strong Bitcoin is after it held this 40 level. This 40 has been really important because it was the 18. If it breaks the 18, it probably goes all the way down and tests 30. But instead, we break back up through 50, and now it looks like we're heading to new highs. Getting a little overbought in the short term. I think we're due for a little bit of a pullback, but you know, strong trend based on the ADX. I like the looks of this. It's just gotten a little ahead of itself in the near term. So let's go to Coin, obviously another one of these stocks in this space. And I started out using with the hourly over on the top left. So I've got my 4 time frames, monthly, weekly, daily, and hourly. And I wanted to do this again to show how we don't have that much history on the monthly or the weekly. But notice what took place on the daily. We can draw a downtrend line here. We broke that downtrend, rallied up and came back and had a little bit of a pinch play here with green crossing over and holding 25. So we get this 2-bar pullback with the 18 turning to the upside. So now this is the daily chart showing signs of a turnaround, because that's a break of the trend line. That's 1. You come back and test the moving average. That's 2. If we go and look at where this was taking place, that's right here. Notice how the 18 crossed down below the 40, and then we had a move right to the upside. This was a zero line reversal with low ADX. So you could draw the trend line in, or you could just take the break of the 40 to the upside. Either one is a pretty solid signal in this case. So again, imposing trend trigger, but this time the hourly into the daily trend. So you just kind of want to be on the lookout for that. And yes, I do like to look for turnaround plays to use this concept. In other words, this isn't an 18 above the 40. This is a 1, 2, 3 developing, a turnaround developing. And yeah, I like to buy the 2 on the pullback, especially when we're getting confirmation of a turn in MACD and ADX. All right, so I wanted to cover that and make sure you saw this. So now we're going to look at this this is another one in the same space, has a different pattern. We didn't get much of a pullback on the monthly chart. If we go to the weekly, we have this strong move, pull back, and then you kind of go straight back up to test the high, and then it comes back and pulls back again, and now we're breaking out. So higher bottom, still keeping the 18 and the 40 rising. ADX is staying strong. I mean, this isn't a pretty powerful trend. Now we're testing this high. I'm a little more reluctant to look at this right at this peak like this. I'd rather either see it break out and then look to buy maybe a little pullback after that, or see if it settles in a little bit right around this 4,000 mark before attempting to break out. Then that might be playable as well. So that's kind of the way. I just don't like buying breakouts when they're overbought. Here is an opposing trend trigger, 18 below the 40, price below both, and then price just with a big green bar. Look for these big monster green bars crossing up back through the moving averages. It's quite often the operative signal on this pullback here. So I thought that was sort of interesting. Now, ETHE. I got a lot of requests for Bitcoin and the blockchain type area. And so I just wanted to cover them all at once. Similar pattern. In fact, it's pretty much identical to the one we just saw. And again, the weekly is showing this pretty powerful trend where we make a spike and we pull back, but we get going again fast enough before the 18 rolls over, and then we come back and test the 18 that's rising above a rising 40, and then we turn back to the upside. Now this hasn't broken out. I think I'd be willing to look at this on a break at 40, but just keep this in mind on all of these first four. These are incredibly volatile. Go look at your average true range on these. They're massive. There's a lot of movement. Just got to be careful. I would personally, if I'm going to play this area, I would be looking to play smaller positions and use wider stops. I think you have a better chance of making money that way. Now, I'm going to cover IWM, which is the Russell 2000 ETF. And the reason why is because this is incredibly powerful. And it's also the second way that this two time frame pattern can set up. This is an opposing trend pattern to the monthly, and I'm going to show you why. So on the monthly chart, you get this powerful move to the upside, and then you start working it off going sideways rather than pulling back. So instead of getting a deep pullback towards the 18-month, we have this sort of sideways consolidation pattern that's been going on for about 6 months. And in this case, I'm not necessarily looking for the 18 to cross down below the 40. I just want them to get together. I want them to meet up. And then in this case, because it's a zero line reversal pattern, I'm going to just draw the trend line in place. And, you could go down to the daily to find the trend line. Essentially, we want to see this get back up at least through 230, maybe even break out, because you could use a horizontal trend line in this case. But the bottom line is this is a very attractive area right now, something I'd be watching and looking into. I would be going through the Russell 2000 stocks, seeing which ones have attractive patterns. And I can tell you, I've been through a number of them. There's a lot of strong monthlies, and they're getting these pullbacks that are causing the opposing trend pattern on the weekly chart. So go look for those, but definitely some interesting names there. Okay, let's get into KHC. This is a pullback on the monthly. The monthly is 18-month is now rising, but MACD hasn't crossed above the zero line yet. So there are some signs of a turnaround here, but I want to see a little bit more confirmation. Now we're forming an opposing trend pattern right now. You see how the 18 is below the 40 and price is below both. I want to see some confirmation. Clearly, we need to get back up through the 40 at a minimum, but I'd almost like to see this maybe come up and into the zone and come back out and then come back through like that, form a little bit more of a complex reversal pattern to give me a little bit more confidence just based on what's taking place and the fact that we don't have a lot of momentum confirmation on the monthly yet. The weekly had a pretty nice move to the upside. But again, I'm looking at the trend on this time frame to determine whether I want to be there or not. I like the overall pattern, but I'd like to see a little bit better momentum. So IEYE. So we're making a pretty good move. No pullbacks here. We've got a strong move on the monthly that just refuses to really go through any more than a 1 bar pullback. on the monthly chart. The ADX is pretty strong. We had a sideways consolidation and started to move up again. I'm just sort of the opinion that the trend is solid here. The one component that's bothering me a little bit, and this is the type of thing you want to keep an eye on. So if you get in this as this is breaking out, or you're buying this pullback or whatever, notice what's missing here. We've got this green DI that on a breakout, pullback, and new high. We haven't had green DI cross above 25. That really kind of bothers me. I'd like to seek some confirmation that the buyers are really showing strength. And the fact that they're not, I would probably shy away from doing any buying. Now, if I'm in this, I would probably be willing to give this to the 18-week or this prior low because the trend is okay. MACD looks okay. And maybe we'll get a little bit more confirmation in green DI coming up. But I would not be a buyer in this on the pullback on the daily or something like that because I haven't seen enough confirmation on green DI. NIO. So we've got a opposing trend pattern developing because we had a strong move on the monthly and now we've had this consolidation pattern. We're back to trend support on the monthly chart. Good ADX pattern, okay? So we have trend support in the mid-30s. Now, if you notice, this turned up. You see how this turned up before the 18 got below the 40. So we don't really have a setup until all the way here, until we get back below both moving averages. Now we're looking for this to cross back above. The one thing you could look for in this instance is a break of the downtrend line. And I would like to see some form of a 1, 2, 3, or maybe even after the break, turn back and do that. One of the two. Just this is sort of a double bottom. We do have low ADX. Base your decision on the strength of the bar and the volume and green DI. If green DI gets going and you get volume going and you cross through the moving averages and through the trend line, then I would be willing to buy that breakout as long as it's not overbought at that point. PGC. So we've got a pretty decent move to the upside, but you're coming up against some resistance in the mid-30s on the monthly. See, this is why I like to look at the big picture. Let's just look at it from a wide angle, see what's going on. We've got support at 30 and resistance at 35. So you have to make decisions based on that. I don't know that we're really ready to break out through 35 quite yet. But if these moving averages come together or the 18 comes down through the 40 and we're still holding this 30 level, MACD gets down closer to 30, then I would probably be willing to take a look at this. Today's action that started today, not really what we're looking for. In this instance, it's a little bit too harsh a sell-off. We're getting a little red DI showing up. So now we got to see if this can hold 30, 31. No real rush here. We're caught in a range. WOOF, we don't have a lot of history on the monthly. It's been more of a kind of a choppy sideways, sort of a range pattern. But look at what's taken place. We got pretty good support at 20, and we got pretty good resistance up around 27.5. So if you're going to play this right now, no trend on the monthly, no trend on the weekly. You have a flat moving average on the weekly time frame. I've got to be down on the smaller time frames if I want to play this. I don't really see anything on the bigger picture pattern. But I do like this ADX crossing above 25 and rising here. And we just took out this key area in the 22.5 area. So I think that's pretty bullish. But I have to be a trader if I want to play this, in my opinion. Now, if this can come up and pull back on the weekly with the 18 cupping around like that, now all of a sudden I can play the weekly chart and go down to the daily as a trigger. So I'm looking for the trend time frame. Where is there a trade? I'm looking for trend support. Trend support can only take place when you have a rising 18. So you got to be on the lookout for that. Obviously, the hourly has had that, and we keep pulling back and holding it. But you'd have to be an intraday trader to be able to play that. Let's look at REXR. We have a pretty nice strong trend on the monthly chart, but we're getting this is for the first time. Well, we got a little bit away here and then it pulled back. Now we're getting a little away from the 18-month again. So you got to take that into account if you're going to trade this or be in this. Just kind of be on the lookout for that. Momentum conditions are really good on the weekly chart, and we just had a pullback, and it overran the the weekly 18, but it held the 40. And so sometimes this is the way this plays out. This is still an operative trendable trade this way. It's finding trend support at the 40 in this case, not the 18. And in this case, it had a pretty steep decline. So this would have been a tough one for me because I think I would have waited for some kind of a pullback, and it just kind of took off. I'd still be waiting for a pullback, maybe towards 62.5, something like that, as the next is the first pullback after you get through and make a run. So, I think the trend is up, but it's a little overbought right now. ULTA, I don't like the recent action. So we got up against this high up here where you gapped and kind of gave it all back. And now we're coming back up a test and we get another gap to the downside. Pretty tough support to get through at 400. So you just need to keep that in mind. Now you have to see how this 350 area, if this can hold 350, then we're probably caught in a range. If it can't hold 350, then I think there's some downside risk in this. The next support would be around 300. SITC has made a pretty nice run to the upside on the monthly chart. We've got a little bit of distance. It's way down at 11.5 on the 18 and the 40. What I'd be looking for actually is some kind of a pullback on the weekly chart. You've got an overbought condition here. To work that off, I'd almost want to see an opposing trend pattern develop on the weekly. Now, if I want to play this, because I think this is a little bit of a breakout and it's strong ADX, that's fine. I have to do it off of a pullback here. We've got trend support here, a price support and trend support right here on the pullback on the daily chart. I've got to go to the hourly chart and look for opposing trend trigger. And it might come in the form of, it could be just a simple break of the 40, but I like to find a little bit more comprehensive price action. Sometimes you pull up and come back down and then do that. And I get a little bit more confirmation that the trend is reversing back to the upside. So I'd like to see that in this case. But either way, you could play it like that, but you have to play it as a trader if you're going to do it that way. PBR. So, we're really caught in a sideways pattern. We don't really have a trend on the monthly. It's more neutral, but there's pretty big trend. There's pretty big price support here. I don't think there's much downside at all. And then you go over to the weekly chart and it's just flat. We got a flat 18 and a flat 40. There is no trend on this time frame. So I have to look for, if I have low ADX, which I do, I'm looking for a breakout probably through 12.5. That's just going to be the sort of the kickoff move here. I don't really want to buy any kind of a pullback when you don't have a trend and you don't have any momentum. So you got to look to play the breakout at 12.5. That's how I would go about it. Let's look at this one, Micron, because this goes to the reason why I use 2 time frames, because again, we're pulling back to trend support. We also have major price support here. But what's missing? Well, we have the 18 below the 40 on the weekly chart and prices below both moving averages. But what I don't have is a trigger. And if price just keeps going like this, there's no trade. And if we go down far enough to move this, to make this roll over, then I'm no longer interested in Micron. I'm looking for something else. So that's why I wait for a trigger on the weekly chart to make sure that I'm getting a sign that this trend is kicking back into gear in line with the monthly chart. So that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for tuning in. Please feel free to reach out to me. My contact information is listed. And also keep sending in those stock requests to stocktalk@stockcharts.com. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time.
Hey, Grayson Rose here with StockCharts. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed that video. If you did, consider giving it a like down below, maybe leave us a comment, and if you're new to the channel, you can subscribe at the link up above. We're gonna bring you daily content from an incredible collection of technical analysts and financial experts.